Finally, we're on to the AFC East and the Buffalo Bills. Last year, the Bills, everyone's darling favorite to finally bring a championship to Buffalo. It did not go as such. They did finish 13-3 in the regular season. They only played 16 games, though, because they had that one game canceled. And our graphics team is perfect and absolutely right by getting that correct. Still projected for 10.22 wins. Fascinating spot for the Buffalo Bills. They were the darlings last year.
Yeah.
It's just amazing the ebbs and flows of narrative. Because in the season last year that finished in a disappointment for the Bills, they did beat the Chiefs in the regular season. They were on their way
right. I mean,
to
remember,
the number one seed. They had a path to the number one seed.
Right. The reason the Damar Hamlin abandoned game was such a big deal, independent of the fact that, Damar Hamlin almost died on the field, was all three of those teams had a chance of the number one seed, depending on the outcome of that game and how that final week of the season was going to go. So it was a huge thing because any of the Cincinnati, Buffalo, or Kansas City could have had home field advantage all the way through the playoffs. Yeah,
so last year at this time, it was like, hey, the Bills, they're close. They're adding Von Miller, another year of Josh Allen. Like, this is their year. This is their window. And just because they did lose in the divisional round pretty handily to the Bengals took it to them in the snow in Buffalo. Disappointing loss. But because that happened, people are, the Bills' window's closed. And I don't think it's closed. I think between that and then the fact that we talk about the Chiefs as just inevitable. Well, of course they're going to be in the Super Bowl again. Of course they're going to win. When the reality was, in the same season last year, they did lose to the Bills in the regular season. The Chiefs were just a couple plays away from losing to the Bengals, a couple plays away from losing to the Eagles. It's not like this is easy. So the same way maybe the Chiefs are a touch overrated because we talk about them as inevitable, I think it's overrated to say that the Bills' window's closed. They're in the same position as they were last year, except maybe this year Von Miller will stay healthy the entire year. And you could argue maybe the Bills have made some additions that could make them even better.
Yeah, I don't think they're in the same position as they were last season in terms of. So I agree they are still one of the top contenders in the AFC, right? They're still right there with Kansas City, with Cincinnati, with whoever else you want to throw into that bucket. Where I think they differ from a year ago is this time last season, they were the consensus best roster on the NFL. Like that was the one thing everybody was saying heading into the season, right? Kansas City is still Kansas City. Cincinnati is going to be coming up in the rails, but Buffalo has the best roster top to bottom of any of these teams on paper heading into the season. I don't think that that's necessarily true this season. I think the gap has been closed by a couple of teams, and I think they have a couple of weaknesses that they might not have had before. So it's not that they've necessarily taken a step back, but I think it is slightly different to the way it was a year ago in terms of reality as well as narrative.
We did say last year at this time, if there is a weakness, it is the offensive line. We saw that at times last year. I think the other thing that I've been looking for with the Bills is when the game is on the line, we've said every single week, they put the ball in Josh Allen's hands. They had a few games last year where they distributed it more, and it wasn't Josh Allen running it on every third and short. Again, a little hyperbole, but they put the ball in his hands in must-win games. And I do want to see other players get relied on a little bit more. I mean, he still has to throw them the ball or whatever, but from a run game perspective, from an O-line perspective, can you trust everyone around you so it's not just Josh Allen? Because that showed up in his play last year. He had not just turnover-worthy plays. They weren't just aggressive, he's just chucking it into coverage, trusting his arm. He had some egregious misreads of coverage last year. You got to take a little bit of pressure off of Josh Allen this year. And so from a run game perspective, are they going to do that with James Cook probably in line to be their number one running back? But Damian Harris, who's been really productive for the Patriots, having those guys take a little bit more of the workload. I like the way they've built this receiving core. Probably a little bit too much pressure on Gabe Davis last year. Stephon Diggs is your true number one. Davis might not be a true two, but Deontay Hardy as a deep threat. And then, of course, Dalton Kincaid. We'll see if he can be effective early on as a tight end, big slot type of player. Hopefully there's a little bit more pressure taken off of Gabe Davis so he could just be your another vertical threat in this offense.
Yeah, Josh Allen led the league in turnover-worthy plays last season, and his turnover-worthy play rate was double what it was for Joe Burrow and Patrick Mahomes. It was more than double what it was for Jalen Hurts, Justin Herbert, like the very best quarterbacks in the NFL.
And do you think that's Josh Allen's play style, or do you think there's something to him trying to take everything on himself from an offensive standpoint?
I think it's a bit of both. Josh Allen, like Dak Prescott, I think is a player that's always going to skew a little bit high in those turnover-worthy plays. Like he's just going to have more of them than some of these other players. And he will generally offset that by making more big plays than most of these other guys. Like Allen's big-time throw rate was 7.6% last year, which is that's insane. That was also the number one in the NFL. And actually the number one by a freaking margin, like way higher than anybody else. So it's not inherently bad. It's just part of his game. He is, another one of those. He's like super volatile. Like the baseline is higher than a Jameis Winston, but he's on that spectrum of we are going to see some wild stuff in both directions with Allen. But I definitely think there was a part of this whole Bills offense being built on what he can do. There's a fine line between that being the most efficient way of executing the offense and asking too much of the guy. And I think they're aware of that, but also, so in terms of the passing, but also in terms of how much you want him running the ball as well. Like they have talked about how if you want to be a quarterback that's playing till you're 40, if you want to have that 15, 20-year career, you can't run the ball the way he runs the ball as much as he runs the ball every year. You're going to have to dial that back a bit. But again, where is that line? How much is too much? And how much, because what makes Josh Allen genuinely special is if you're looking at 4th and 1, he's basically unstoppable, right? He can run over you. He can run around you. He can pass the ball. He can do, several different ways that he can beat you. And effectively, there's no way as a defense of stopping all of them. So you can't take that off the table because that's what separates him from a lot of these other quarterbacks that are good, not great. So I think Buffalo this season has a very difficult task to dial that in both in all those different aspects. Like where is the most efficient version of Josh Allen without asking too much of him, without simultaneously taking away what makes him as special as he is.
Can you just save that to the playoffs, though? Look, don't get me wrong. Remember in 2021, Josh Allen was on pace to have one of the best playoff runs of all time.
Right.
Back-to-back games. And they lost the 13-second game. He has not played well in the playoffs pretty much outside of that run, since the rest of his career. I think for the Bills to win a Super Bowl, he's got to go on one of those runs. It'll still be Josh Allen driven. I'm more just talking it's week 8. You're playing whoever. Does he have to be the guy running a QB sweep on 3rd and 4? Does he have to be the guy doing that in the second quarter of a week 8 game? Yeah. Does he have to be the guy every time it's 3rd and short? The 4th and the QB sneak stuff's different. I'm talking QB sweep and keepers. Does he have to do that? Does he have to scramble for a first down instead of just hitting an open receiver underneath? That's what I want to see a little bit more of from the Bills. Dalton Kincaid, I think, can be that guy. You've highlighted his ability to just have a feel for zone and just getting open. And are they going to use him as a big slot? He's got incredible ball skills. It's a lot to ask of a rookie tight end. They don't always hit the ground running right away if you call him a tight end, but I think Kincaid can add a lot to this offense.